Ramadan Kareem to all our observant Muslims. Here's the breakdown. Both the S&P and Nasdaq were down 1 and 0.4% relatively, with the Dow and Russell up. Sentiment was slightly quashed by Fed head Powell, who warned that the COVID recovery could be in danger. He speaks as Johnson & Johnson's vaccine joins AstraZeneca in fears of generating blood clots. Otherwise, mortgage applications decreased by another 3.7% in the past week, as both import and export prices increased by just above 2% each month on month. European indices were mostly up, the FTSE gaining a nice 0.7%, but the DAX losing 0.17. Industrial contraction in the industrial production in the EU contracted by 1%, a tad better than expected, while the long-term 30-year Bundesbond auctioned offered a 11% increase in yield, a 0.11% increase, I think. Central banker Christine Lagarde yesterday told her audience that the US's latest $2.25 trillion stimulus bill would help nudge the Eurozone's GDP up by 1/3%. Asian shares were mixed this morning across the board. China's A50 up 0.5%, but the Shanghai Dow down losing 1.15, Taiwan and Korea up, but the Hang Seng down, Australia's ASX up, New Zealand's Dow down. The Australian dollar is reacting badly to a better than expected two-tick drop in the nation's March unemployment rate and an equal increase in participation, and the yuan continues down as Chinese corporations concerned about their legal status in the country start making for the US dollar. Oil jumped by $2.20 yesterday after the EIA announced a very welcome 5.9 million barrel cutback in inventories. It's currently down 0.25% for the session, and Bitcoin is dropping from its 64K high after Coinbase started trading yesterday at $381 in its published listing. That is 53% higher than its reference price of $250. Cryptos are just for speculation, said Jerome Powell at an interview that same day. Let me just remind you that the Coinbase's public listing means no intermediaries, no underwriters, simply the company selling its shares on the NASDAQ directly to investors. In earnings yesterday, all three banks surprised to the upside. Goldman Sachs revenue soared by 102% year on year, JP Morgan's by 400%, and Wells Fargo by a mere 2% year on year, hit primarily by their retail orientation. Canada's Shaw Communications and Tesco did not report, and Bed Bath & Beyond missed on income but lost less than expected on earnings. Today we have more banks, that of Bank of America and Citigroup, so alongside BlackRock Investments and PepsiCo, and then there's L'Oreal and Delta. Let's talk about Delta, a company based in Georgia paying lip service to the struggle against voter suppression. No, you know what? Let's talk about corporate meddling in politics in general. It's not a new thing. The first public company was in fact created by Queen Lizzie I, the East India Trading Company that killed off 1 million Chinese in the Opium Wars. And corporate governments and the political type have gone hand in hand ever since the first Rockefeller somehow got his hands on the country's oil, and President McKinley received $16 million in 1896. That is billions in today's figures. Companies have been bankrolling politicians to a frightening extent since 1976, when Congress said that funding politicians was not an invitation to corruption. Talk about the cat delivering its own dinner. But now the tide is turning. We suddenly have over 100 corporate heads telling politicians what to do. Now, this in itself may be lamentable, but in the case of voter suppression, one wonders if the CEOs have been talking to their shareholders, most of them quite obviously white Anglo-Saxon Republicans. Coke and Delta were obviously not signatories to the letter sent to the New York Times, a bastion of Democrats. Now we're talking about big names here: Amazon, Ford, GM, Apple. Some of these companies are being hauled before Congress for antitrust hearings. Others stand to lose tax concessions in their home states and let them get away with, well, not paying taxes. The fight is clearly only at its beginning. It's going to be an interesting one, and I hope I'll be able to follow it in some way that makes sense. The question is what will happen when it begins threatening the global